Welcome everyone to MailFuzz TV. I am Peter and today I'm going to be talking about The Last of Us Season 1 Episode 4. It's called Please Hold to My Hand. So full spoilers for the episode, and I almost wanted to yell out, we entered Pittsburgh, but we didn't, because that's one of the changes actually, is that in the game they go to Pittsburgh. In the show, this episode takes place in Kansas City. Primarily, obviously there's a little bit before they get there at the start. And some proper bonding. I was talking a lot at the end of the last episode about how Ellie and Joel felt like it was maybe the beginning of some form of actual relationship forming between them. And this episode kind of extended that, and it showed more examples of Joel trying to pull back kind of repeatedly. There's a lot of moments in the episode where he's realizing he's starting to open up and then pulls back when Ellie asks a question. Like, he'll want to ask Ellie a question about how she maybe hurt a human being before, which she mentions, but then he pulls back when she asks a question back. When she asks how he hurt someone, or if he did something bad, like did he ever kill an innocent person, he quietens up, he tenses up, and it goes away. But alternatively, you have the bonding of the simple little things like the joke book, right? Which is something from the game. But it's very effective here in this episode, where she starts cracking these jokes, and it's like torture form the first time. And we get an intentional kind of like bookend almost of the episode, where there's like two different scenes where they go to sleep. There's one in the forest early on after they've been driving for a bit, and there's one towards the end of the episode when they're hiding in the apartment building, or maybe the hotel. Actually, it's a hotel. I mean, it's a hotel in the game anyway, so I presume it's a hotel in the show. It felt like a hotel room. So they do this thing where she pretends that she's going to ask a serious question. She's like, Joel, I need to ask you something serious. And he's like, okay. And then she does a setup for a terrible joke. And the first time, he kind of guesses the punchline, and she kind of laughs and insists that he must have heard it before, and he says he didn't. And it's like, go to sleep. And at the end of the episode, when she cracks a dumb joke about diarrhea being genetic because it runs in your genes, it actually makes him laugh. But he's kind of hiding it, right? And I mean, he ends up laughing out loud, and she can hear it. But there's a few moments here, because in both scenes, he spends a lot of the scenes like with his back to Ellie, and we can see his face, but but she can't. And we see at the end of the episode, he does actually smile, and when he's laughing. There's a couple of moments where he is clearly awake and he's looking forward, but he's kind of ignoring Ellie saying anything. We get all these senses of him, like the moments where he's trying to not engage with her, and then moments when he does kind of like break down and kind of actually let himself kind of enjoy just the company, enjoy having this person around and sort of forming a bond with her. That push and pull is there throughout the episode, but this is obviously the most pleasant it's been. It's the most touching it's been, perhaps. It's like, and there's genuine learning moments, but not ones that betray kind of like who the characters are. But one of the things I did notice in this episode that I really liked is that Ellie really started to act more like a kid throughout this episode. The episode opens with her with the gun that she got from Bill's place, and she's like standing in front of a mirror in a bathroom, and she's just sort of like playing with it. She's like pointing it and like going pew pew, and trying to like understand how to use it. She takes the clip out and takes the bullet out of the chamber and stuff, and she's kind of trying to like, because she's clearly never really used a gun before, and it's something that she's been wanting to do in this world. And I think there's an element of, I think, the audience that might feel like she is just kind of being a bit childish with this desire to want one. But also they're in this world where the occasion might call where she kind of really needs one. And that's something that comes up throughout the episode, is the idea of like Joel eventually kind of making a choice that she should have one, and she should be taught how to use it properly, and it shouldn't be something that she's sneaking around. And maybe in some ways that's why he ultimately gives into it, is that when she does show up with a gun in a moment, not only does it save his life, maybe suggesting that it would be good to have a partner who has his back, but also just the idea that she's going to keep sneaking around. She's going to keep trying to do it without his permission. And the more she does that, the more dangerous it is, and the more something bad might happen. So again, it's very much like a parental father figure instinct kind of coming in. It's like, do you want to like just ban your kid from doing something? And yeah, in the modern real world, yeah, you should ban your kid from using a gun, but or do you train them how to use it? Do you make them sure they understand the dangers and the safety, and make sure that they're capable and have the correct skill set to use it? So again, very father daughter stuff kind of starting to pop up here. When they're in the car, there's a couple of things worth mentioning. I genuinely didn't think they were going to do this from the game. I thought the magazine moment with Ellie looking at the gay porn magazine in the car, I didn't think that would be in this episode, just purely because in the game that was very much a confirmation of Bill being gay, right? You know, it was kind of hinted, but that was kind of your punctuation to like really sort of like hit it home. So I thought the show wouldn't do it because we didn't need that as the audience. The last episode was all about Bill and Frank, so we didn't need this confirmation. That said, though, I'm glad they put it in because it is really funny. Ellie's reaction, and then again Joel being this awkward kind of father figure, saying, "No, that's not for kids. You shouldn't be looking at that." And the lines of dialogue in the scene are like basically right out of the game. Like there's like the entire 30-second sequence is like almost word for word exactly the same. So that was a really fun moment. But again, it shows you him sort of like starting to care, starting to show concern for like maybe like the fact that he has an opinion on what she should or should not be seeing, kind of like the mass grave from last episode. This one's a bit more silly and a bit more kind of, you know, amusing because it's nothing super serious, and ultimately it's something that she's going to learn about at some point if she hasn't already. Yeah, so you've got that early on. You've got the conversation about the siphoning the gas, and she asks how it works, and he tries to kind of bullshit his way through it, and she's like, "You don't know," and he admits. So this again, this idea of her challenging him in certain ways. She's at that kind of perfect age where sometimes she'll have ideas and opinions that feel quite mature for her age, especially in this world she's grown up in. But then there's other times when she's like playing with a gun, or she is, laughing at the porn magazine, where it's like, oh no, she's still kind of a kid. She's still really a kid in a lot of ways too, and that she needs guidance and she needs support. One of the very fascinating things that was kind of coming up in this episode actually was whenever the subject of Tommy came up. Which, by the way, shout out, the actor who plays Tommy in the game, I think, is in this episode. I am pretty sure the guy with the beard with Kathleen is the actor who plays Tommy in the game. But the subject of Tommy coming up was very interesting to me because Joel in the car talks about his backstory with Tommy, and that Tommy was this guy who joined the military when he was young because he was this idealist who wanted to help save the world. And he didn't feel like that was what he did when he actually went to the military. He went to, I think he said, Desert Storm. And he came back kind of disillusioned, and that he didn't really feel like he accomplished anything, and his view of the world and the powers that be were very different as a result. And once the outbreak happened, they kind of stuck together, and they traveled eventually to Boston, where they met Tess, and that kind of became their unit. And then Joel says that, but then he met Marlene, and Tommy kind of once again got these ideas of being a hero and trying to help save the world, and that's why he joined the Fireflies to begin with. And he's heard that he's not with them anymore, but he'll have knowledge about where they can maybe find some Fireflies. So some of this obviously lines up with the story in the game and stuff, but I think it was fleshed out here in some really nice little ways that I quite liked. And one of the things that I'm really getting the sense of here with the Tommy talk in this episode, and especially this idea that Joel from episode 1 has been like, I need to get to Tommy, I think he's in trouble, I have to go and help him, is I think it ties back into the letter from last week with having someone to protect. I talked about how Tess never quite became that for him. In theory, she should have been, but she never really was. I think that what this is really getting at with these conversations is that his brother was that for him, perhaps. After the outbreak happened, after the death of his daughter, the person in his life that he had to protect was Tommy. And there's hints throughout this episode, when they get to the city and there's this ambush with a guy pretending to be injured, and they're going to ambush them, and Joel instantly knows that it's an ambush, and he, does what he does to try and get out of it. When Ellie asks him, how did you know that was an ambush? He basically says, I've been on both sides of that conflict, and doing things, and he admits that it was him, Tess, and his brother. I think this is really seeding the idea that Joel, being who he is, being like Bill, and going too far to protect the people around him, I really think there's going to be a real sense of tragedy when he does eventually maybe get to Tommy, because it feels like it really is setting up this idea that Tommy left and maybe even just joined the Fireflies to get away from Joel in the first place because of who Joel is, and because of maybe the types of things that Joel would do in the name of keeping Tommy safe. He wasn't willing to live with maybe the I wouldn't say the villain that Joel would become, but just the he, we've already seen examples of Joel going too far, people being scared of Joel's retaliation if they hurt Tess, things like that. And I think this stuff with Tommy's really getting to that stuff as well. I think it was particularly in the scene where he's talking in the car to Ellie and he's saying that he's going to go find him and he's persistent. And there's a really specific line of dialogue where he says, he's in trouble and I think he needs me. Or that wasn't the exact words, but it was something to that effect. And that to me felt like projection. It felt like Joel believes this because he wants to believe it. And I don't think he's actually, even though he's with Ellie right now, he reminds Ellie that she's just cargo. He sort of reinforces that, even though they're starting to bond a little bit. They bond a little bit before he says that, and they bond again at the end of the episode. They go through some, surviving together throughout the episode, and all that stuff's great. But there's still these moments where he tries to distance himself by saying, no, you're just cargo. And I think at this point, like, he still believes that Tommy might be the person that he's there to protect, and that's who he wants to get to. And he's not accepted anything else yet. So I did definitely sort of feel a lot of these things being planted in the exchanges specifically about Tommy in this episode, and also with what was already happening with Joel's motivations in episode 1, where I need a battery so we can get the truck working so we can go see Tommy. Really cool stuff. Really cool, like, solid character building and like planting these seeds throughout all these story beats. So really liked all that stuff. And obviously, like, I could say even more because I kind of know where a lot of the story's going from the games, but I've left all that aside and just talked about what I think the episode is clearly kind of hinting at and setting up in and of itself. And not all of it does match the game to a T. Like, there's definitely some of the things I'm talking about, I can kind of see where it's taken from the game, but there's definitely a lot of the other things they've adapted from the game. They're definitely putting little extra layers onto it and fresh extra little spins onto it. Sometimes in a really big way. The whole Bill and Frank thing was completely different in a good way, but sometimes it's just a little thing to make it a bit more tighter story-wise or whatever. So I can definitely see sort of some changes in the future from what I recognize from the game, but I can also see how it fits with what I know from the game as well. And that's the really fun thing about the adaptation that this is that it's kind of doing this great balancing act of respecting the source material, but enhancing it for the medium that it's being created for now. Really good stuff. So big thing. I'll get back to Joel and Ellie. Actually, no, I'll stick. No, I'll get back to them because it's kind of the threat that leads to all the other stuff with them. So I think it was very clear getting into this episode, knowing which part of the story I was getting into. It was like, okay, we have been teasing heavily last episode that more dangerous than the infected is other human beings, and the hint in this episode even being that because Joel once upon a time was that threat. To quote another great TV show, he was the one who knocks once upon a time. And here, it really felt like we were going into an episode where human beings were going to be the bigger threat than the infected. And that's what Joel's worried about. There's that great moment early on where Ellie's wanting the fire and he says no, and she turns off the lantern, and he's lying there, and he looks over at his gun, and we just cut to the next scene. And it's like Ellie's sleeping in the night and Joel's just standing there watching the forest with his gun. He's not went to sleep. He's actually staying up and standing guard because he's that concerned about other people finding them and what they might do. Because that's the thing. Ellie says, what will they do if they find us? Like, rob us? And he's like, nah, they won't just stop at that. And there's a lot of, dark insinuations with what that phrase means. So So it was really exciting. You know, last episode was a very emotional character drama episode, and there's a lot of great drama with the characters in this, with the bonding between Ellie and Joel. But I knew going into this episode it was going to be more action-packed, just because of where it was taking place in the game. And I was really excited as soon as they were like getting close to the city. You know, when they get to towards the bridge, and the build-up of the cars means they can't go through, and it's like, we're going to try and go through the city. It was like, oh shit, like I'm excited to see how they handle this side of things. We've seen how they handle sneaking around clickers. Now I was excited to see how they handle the idea of human being enemies who are, you know, like a camper raiders. And one of the things the show adds here is that we actually get to see their camp, this group, in a leader, you know, and Kathleen, who played by Melanie Linsky, who we see kind of, you know, in the video game, just for the comparison's sake, effectively what happens is the encounter you see in the show is what happens, where people try to ambush them in the car, they ram into a store, and then, like, you know, you have to fight your way out, and Ellie helps a little bit. I was expecting Ellie to throw a brick at a bad guy, and that might still happen, because that happened a lot in the game. But you know, in the show specifically, here's a big moment where Joel does take out two of the guys. It's very tense. The fight felt very visceral and very scary. I love how it didn't really give you a clear look at the other shooters. It didn't cut across to the other enemies ducking behind their cover. We just saw like them, you know, moving in the distance, but we mostly stayed close to Joel, so that it was kind of like almost that documentary war type thing where you're not really quite sure where the enemy is at any given point. It was trying to make them imposing, and this like threat that was all around them kind of thing. But you know, he gets pinned down with the last guy, and Ellie chooses to, like, you know, pull out the gun she's got and shoot him. She considers the knife, but she goes with the gun instead. Love the quiet after this, because a big part of this is this idea of like having to be a monster to keep yourself and the people you care about safe. So you've got this guy who doesn't really deserve much in the way of mercy, because he was about to just, you know, possibly kill them, if not just rob them. Certainly once like Joel started firing back, this guy was intent on killing Joel, but he's begging for his life, he's begging for mercy, and Joel makes Ellie like leave to finish the job. The weight of this scene felt great. It felt like it really mattered. It felt like this was like a dark thing that Joel was doing, and the weight of what it was kind of hitting Ellie a little bit. All great stuff. Yeah, so what I was saying though is, so here we actually cut to the camp, and we see Kathleen like kind of running things, and like sort of like the group of people that are going to come after our main characters because that they've killed a few of these people. In the game, you just get like more people showing up, and you just hear like occasionally some dialogue from them talking about the fact that, oh, we need to hunt these two because like they killed some of our men. You know, it's a very sort of passing thing. The show is very much expanding upon it and kind of like tying it into, you know, another part of the story, which is the Henry and Sam story, which we hear Kathleen talk about a Henry. They're trying to hunt a Henry. We don't necessarily know why they want him gone, or why they want him so bad. I don't think we hear that in this episode. They eventually mention that he also has Sam with him, and that this is like two people that are on the run from this group. And we also get a bit of mythology here, where it feels like this group, whoever they are, seem to like take back the city from Fedra. They say, you know, the quarantine zone looks like it's done, like the gates busted, and it seems like this is just a group of people who overthrew their local Fedra government and have become kind of a militia of sorts. And it's hard to sympathize them given the tactics that they were using for, you know, to try and trick Joel and Ellie. And we get a little bit of stuff here where Kathleen's interrogating this doctor who might have been helping Henry elude them. And he's just like, I'm your doctor, or, you know, I delivered you. And he's kind of pleading for his life and refusing to give up if he knows where Henry is. She certainly believes he does. And it's notable that when she comes outside and finds out that a few of her men have been killed, that she just walks back inside and just shoots this doctor without even thinking about it. She checks if like a doctor would help these men survive, because there's one guy who's not quite dead yet. And they say, no, there's no chance, he's dying. And she just goes back in and shoots him. So she saw if there was a use for him. I think it's maybe interesting because this character is basically just new. I mean, maybe there's like a character you can compare her to in the game, but I don't think she was in the game. I kind of talk from this that she felt like seeing some of her men be killed by these outsiders, which she's just assuming has something to do with this guy Henry that she wants to get to. And I know who Henry is from the game, but like, I'm just from the context of this episode, no one really knows who Henry is. It's almost like it's like she feels like challenged, like she looks like a failure because some of her men just got shot. That she just immediately goes back in and shoots this guy to feel like she's in control. Like I basically would call it she feels emasculated. Effectively, it's a weird word to use when we're talking about a woman, but I think like she feels like she's looked weak in front of everyone. She needs to sort of like feel like she's powerful or something. Like it feels like she goes back in after feeling that she's just suffered a loss, and that she's, at the very least she's mad and she does it out of rage. But it does kind of feel like it's provoked by this idea that she's just failed and she feels that she's failing to lead these people, and this is like a moment of rage as a result of that. So it tells us a little bit about her character. As we go on. So they start looking for Joel and Ellie, and they don't really know who they're looking for, really. They're just looking for outsiders, and they're just going from, apartment to apartment looking for them. And Joel and Ellie are hiding in like a store, and this is where they have some more of their back and forth, where he kind of like talks about how she shouldn't have done that, or let me rephrase that, she shouldn't have had to do that. He says that you're a kid, you shouldn't have had to have done that. And he's really, this is a great performance from both of them. Honestly, I think both of them nail this episode. I think it's easy to sort of give the last couple episodes and say they're better overall. I think this one maybe has the best performances of the two leads. I think Ellie bouncing around this happier, kind of more kid-like kind of persona, that she's starting to sort of get more comfortable around Joel. And then Joel's kind of reluctance, but also growing concern and feeling bad that she had to, go through what she just went through. Really hit for me, I think, and I really felt this moment. And he makes this choice to show her how to use the gun, and sort of trust her with that. And this is a beat from the game. It's in a very different place though, and it's in a slightly different kind of situation from the game, but it is fundamentally this idea of like trust is forming between them, and I think this moment still really works in the context of that. I do wonder, actually, that I was thinking about this when the episode ended, if this episode and next episode were originally one big episode, because this episode's only about 45 minutes, and the next one I think's 50 something. There was a list of the run times going around a couple of weeks ago, but all of the episodes thus far have felt like they're completely not self-contained. It's a very serialized show, obviously. It's one big story, but they all feel like completed chapters, and that each one's been kind of, there's clear bookends of what the start and the end of the episode is, and it feels like we're moving on to the next part of the journey. This is the only one that it feels like we're in the middle of a part of the story. Like, it's like it feels like we stopped in the middle of the story in the city, and we have the next half to still go through. The only reason why I'm thinking this is because the season is 9 episodes, which is, a slightly weird number. It's not, I mean, there's been other shows with a 9-episode season, but, typically these days it's 8 or 10. Those are the two normal amounts that you get on your most of your HBO and streaming shows and, other cable shows and things like that. Those tend to be the common amounts now. And I wouldn't think anything of it, but just watching this episode and giving the sort of cliffhanger it has, and the fact that it feels like a two-parter, effectively, makes me wonder if it was one big episode that was over 90 minutes, and they said, you know what, this is a bit long, we can have an extra week. And on that subject, the next episode, I believe, is airing early. I think it's coming out on Friday because of the Super Bowl, which is fine with me. I'll take it early. I don't mind. It's better than having to just skip a week, which would have sucked. So I'll take it. So no, really enjoyed this scene between the two of them in the store, and kind of again Joel showing that concern, and then once again teaching her something. And even in the shootout, like saying, hey, you go into that, through that hole in the wall and you hide and you wait, and like there's all these little moments, but then ultimately she still ends up saving him too. He needs her, just as much as she needs him. And they're not necessarily perfect for each other. Like, some of these things that he's going to teach her and that she's going to learn about surviving arguably are unhealthy. But fundamentally, they both need each other. More than they perhaps are willing to admit or realize up until this point. And I think you really see some of that forming throughout this episode. So they tease sort of some monster stuff, right? So I think we're going to get some monster stuff next episode. There's like a sinkhole kind of thing. That's maybe not the right term, but there's kind of like cracks emerging in the basement of what might be the very same building that Ellie and Joel are in. I wasn't sure, because they sneak into this building after we see this scene. And I thought it was the same building, but I could be wrong. It doesn't have to be. They could just be going through this building later. But like it's like there's stuff coming up from underground, and Kathleen and like her main dude are pretty scared for what it is, and they shut the door and it's like, we have to deal with this. And she says, let's just barricade close up the building and we'll deal with it after we find Henry. But like, that seems like some pretty nasty shit's coming through here. And the show's done a good job of setting up the fungal stuff, going underground and whatnot. It feels like something big's under there. I think I know what it is, from the game, but this was a good little tease of things to come, I would say. If I have a critique, and it's and this is a very minor one, I would say that when we cut away to this group of characters, Kathleen in her camp, like, I think it's a bit of a double-edged sword, because I appreciate that we can do that in the TV show and give a little bit more context for these like raiders that are going to continually pursue our main characters, and I think it tightens up the story, so I get why they've done it. But at the same time, it kind of felt like we're cutting away from the characters that I really care about, and they feel like they do feel relatively inconsequential. And I'm not so sure I really, I talked about the scene with Kathleen the doctor. I don't think I necessarily cared that much about what she was doing in the scene. It set up some ideas about who she might be, but it was definitely my least favorite part of the episode. And it's not just because it's the stuff that's added, because they've added tons of stuff in the last 3 episodes and I loved all of it. So that's not the concern here. Just fundamentally, it feels like it's functional for the sake of what we need it for the plot to intersect with our main characters, rather than it being interesting on its own. So I will say that. But Joel and Ellie sneak into a tall building because they want to get a look at the city to figure out how to get out of it in the morning. So they're going to go maybe up to the top, but they have to take the stairs. And Joel, as been mentioned, is an older man now. In fact, they mentioned in this that I think he says he's 56, which I guess makes sense given what age he was with a kid in 2003. It makes sense that he's in his 50s. I think that's a little bit older than the game, but I think that's just because of who they've cast, and it makes sense for the actor. But he's knackered going up those stairs. He makes it up like 36 flights of stairs. And I would be knackered at 36 flights of stairs. I don't mind telling you that. I would be absolutely conked out. But they pick a room and they're going to sleep again. So it kind of bookends that scene earlier on in the episode where they're going to sleep in the sleeping bags. Now it's just on some cushions. And when Ellie hits the joke, it actually does come out of nowhere. Like, you think that she's going to talk about something very serious, because they've been talking about a lot of serious things on the way up here, and largely in the last part of the episode, it's not had the funny bits of dialogue. It's been mostly very serious because they're in a tense situation. Or they're having a sweet moment where he's like sort of giving in and teaching her how to use the gun. Here, though, at the end of the episode, it comes out of nowhere where she just sort of like sets up a joke. You're like, diarrhea genetic? What's she talking about? And then she hits you with the punchline, and you realize that it's a payoff. It's the like. Fundamentally, of course, obviously, each of the jokes from the joke book are a joke in and of themselves, a simple setup and punchline, but it's kind of like, this last joke is the punchline to the joke overall, which is, they've set it up throughout the episode, and this is the payoff, is this moment of levity after a really hard day. After a really hard day of like fighting for their life, dealing with bad guys, sneaking around, they're at their lowest, and she cracks this joke and makes them laugh. And he smiles, he laughs, he feels some warmth, he feels something he's probably not felt in a while, I would imagine. So very good stuff, very 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 good stuff. And the cliffhanger, of course, is one would presume Henry and Sam have got them at gunpoint when they wake up. So, you know, and they are Henry and Sam. I'm just saying presume, because technically speaking, the show hasn't confirmed that's who they are. But even if you had, if this wasn't based on anything, you would know that anyway, just because that's who these other people are looking for. It would make sense that this is who we're running into in the city. So, yeah. It's funny. I mean, I never said this on a recording, but I was talking to Connor about the show. Like, you know, I think when we recorded news a few days ago, we were talking about it, and I actually said that I think the city stuff is going to take place over 2 episodes, and I just sort of threw out, I bet the first part ends with Henry and Sam's introduction, and that'll be the tease going into the second one. And sure enough, that's what happened. You know, it did go in quick. It's only 45 minutes, especially after last week's episode, which was, you know, because it was like 80 minutes last week. It definitely felt short, but you know, it packed a lot in there. I really enjoyed the bonding between the two characters. All the teases of Joel's past have been really good, and like his pulling away, but sort of, I think what I was not expecting, and what I'm really pleased with this show, is that from episode 1 I felt like they nailed Joel in terms of like his character and how he, you know, the performance from Pedro Pascal, but just in general how he's written feels like it's nailing who he is from the game in its own way. And Ellie felt like she was being nailed. I think what I'm really impressed with this episode is that the chemistry between them and kind of this heartwarming bond that's forming that I care about as an audience, the way I did in the game, is being nailed so well that like now I'm starting to really root for the characters in a way that I kind of did in the game as well. It's a little bit different because that was interactive and this is not, but it's nailing it in a way and making me like them as a pair and making me enjoy the warmth that's kind of emerging from their interactions. I mean, she made Joel smile and he's a miserable prick. That's got to count for something, damn it. So yeah, that was another great episode. Like I say, you know, the camp stuff with the raiders or whatever you want to call them in the city, like, yeah, it was a little bit weaker than everything else, and I don't think I care particularly about their plot, but it's, you know, it's there to set up who all these people are that are going to be hunting Joel and Ellie throughout, presumably, you know, a lot of the next episode. Potentially gives us a lot of victims for some scarier things should they show up, and it feels like they will based on the teases in this episode. So I'm kind of excited by that. So yeah, I think I want to give like another spoiler warning here for the game. There is one little detail that I would like to talk about for later on in the story. So thank you for watching and listening if you're leaving now, but I'm just going to talk a little bit about one thing from the game that I think. So I might go back to the Tommy stuff here to talk about this. It's just one little thing. Mostly I talked about what I wanted to anyway. I don't think I was able to just kind of talk about it without spoiling what actually happens in the game. But one of the things that it stuck out in my mind as well from the conversation that Joel and Ellie had in this, it was talking about how he wanted to save the world, so he joined like the military, and then he wanted to save the world again, and he joined the Fireflies. And I'm talking about how he didn't like what Joel was becoming in this post-apocalypse and the sort of lengths of things that he would go to keep Tommy safe. Like, you know, for Tommy, it wasn't worth living that life if that's what he had to do to live it. Like, you know, he couldn't live with that. Joel, when he's telling these stories in this episode, he kind of says, like, you know, he's an idiot who wants to save the world. I don't know if he calls him an idiot, but he basically sort of makes it clear he doesn't agree with that, and he keeps wanting to do it, but he can't, and he couldn't. I think what's interesting is that, you know, when we find Tommy, assuming this is the same as the game, is that part of the reason why Tommy seems to have left the Fireflies is because he's formed kind of like a peaceful community in this world. You know, we find out that he's got like people with him. He's kind of in a group, not like unlike the group in the city that we meet in this episode, but they're peaceful. They're farming. They're trying to build a community that's sustainable. And it kind of feels like Tommy, away from Joel, has become the best version of himself. And I think when you think about that in the context of, like, you know, him getting away from Joel and how that might break Joel's heart when he realizes that Tommy just wanted to get away from him because he thinks he's like a poison in his life or something, if whatever you want to call it. The idea that he was able to kind of like start genuinely saving the world just by building this town and giving like a safe haven to people, that's the start of like saving the world. He was able to kind of start accomplishing that once he was away from Joel. I think that's an interesting little detail there that I'm kind of excited to see how it plays out in this version. So that's really cool. So, yeah, that's me. That's my thoughts on The Last of Us episode 4. It was very, 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 very good. Just you could feel the budget oozing out of like them walking around this, you know, rundown version of the city. But it was very exciting, and I'm pumped for next episode. I'm glad it's coming a little bit early. So thank you very much for joining me. You can, of course, support all the content and keep the reviews coming by supporting us over at patreon.com/MailFuzzTV, hitting us with a one-time super chat if that's more your thing. Or, of course, if you want to support us for free, you can do that in many ways, just by liking, subscribing, dinging the bell for notifications. All those things help out and help the YouTube channel grow. So please do any and all of those things. Thank you very much. But that is me, so thank you once again for watching or listening. I always appreciate it. Keep watching TV. Have you got any vanilla?